Good afternoon, you lot. Hope you're good. Oh, I'm not quite positioned in my little frame there, am I? There we go. How are we doing? It's another week. I know it seems a bit of a funny thing to say on a Wednesday, but it was bank holiday. Monday, Tuesday, I'm twin wrestling, and Wednesday, my first show this week. And it brings up this 200th episode, which is mad. Absolutely weird. That falls on the first of a month as well, which feels like a landmark in many ways. Behind the scenes this morning, I was just having our first few hours with our new managing director across our business group, which therefore is a big landmark for us, as well as she's got the tough task of actually being my boss, which is going to be a weird one for her. So we've got a lot of change, basically. 200 episodes of Chewing It Over on the 1st of September with new staff starting as well. So quite exciting. And you'll hear more about that and how that's going to affect our clinical ops sometime soon. Also got some really cool announcements as MSKR as well coming in the next few weeks as everyone gets back from their holidays and start to get back into some normalcy, especially with the new sort of semesters of the unis and stuff like that. So there's a lot going on in September. And so we'll have some news to that effect as well, a bit of a reshuffle that we've done with MSKR, which is certainly poised to shake things up once more. But for this episode, we definitely wanted a special guest on. Wanted something to be getting excited for, and it coincides really well with Claire Minshull taking on her next cohort of her renowned S&C for Therapists course, which has been so popular among so many. I've heard so much feedback, much of which completely unsolicited, people getting in touch and saying, saw Claire at Therapy Live or heard her on the Physio Matters podcast, and therefore have then paid attention to her work and various different things, from one-off webinars that have really rocked people, but also this course and the community of practice that she's able to create around it. It's just been so popular. And so I've been hoping to have this chat with her, particularly about like what makes a tick, what influences her, but also what's drawn her into our little world. We're so lucky to have her thinking across these therapy topics, MSK generally, because woman of many talents that could certainly have repurposed their skill set in many different places and probably doubled down on a research stuff. So for her to be an educator, especially for us in MSK, we're very lucky. So I wanted to just try and scratch beneath the surface a little bit. And so I'm really pleased that Claire's been able to join me on what is this landmark episode. So thank you to those that are letting me know already that the sound is working. My usual paranoia over that. So I'm glad that that's coming through loud and clear. And yes, big celebrations. 200 episodes. Can you believe it? Thanks to those that have tuned into a few of them. You're very brave, tolerating my voice on a daily basis. So appreciate it. Right. So without further ado, hopefully Claire can hear me. Claire, you there?
I'm joking.
I knew you were going to do that. I saw that coming.
Oh, bad joke. I feel like there should be somebody else coming on with that kind of introduction. I'm just waiting for them to pop through.
Don't you go saying that even you get the imposter syndrome. None of that, please. But I hope you do recognise yourself in that analysis. You must have heard some of that as well. Your reputation in the therapy game has just been.
Oh, thank you. You've been so welcoming as a community, and just people saying I can see hi on the chat as well. So Talita and Liz, hi, it's lovely to see you guys. So yeah, you've been so welcoming. I don't really feel like it's something really new for me though, because where I started was very much in MSK and MSK world with my PhD, and I just had the most blissful and unusual should we call it upbringing, I guess. Right. And it was very multi or interdisciplinary. And so sports science, sports medicine, rehabilitation, surgery, like GP medicine, it was all kind of integrated through the pioneering work of my absolute hero and best mentor in the world ever, Di Reese, orthopedic surgeon in Oswestry. So he created that, and I just thought that was normal, like when I came out, I was like, so yeah, I feel very at home in that kind of setting, something I'm really passionate about, and you've just been so, on social media, the community so welcoming, which is lovely.
Good, because I don't want to frame it as if you're like an outsider or anything, because like you've said, it's completely compatible. But it's just that I think for me, looking on, especially in prep for this show, but also looking into your work over the last few years, and and you've been so kind to be contributing to Physio Matters and Therapy Live and stuff now since we've been doing this over the last couple of years. But I do look on and think you could so easily, following your PhD, have just been a postdoc, tripling down on the number crunching and then creating no doubt translatable materials. But it didn't seem like, it didn't seem so obvious that you inevitably were going to go into being the educator you are now, and really helping people that are reaching out to us to say just how applicable this material is in practice. I think that's the bit why, as I say, I don't want to play it out as if you're an outsider, but it definitely just didn't seem like that obvious a step. So I just wondered if you could tell us about what gives you that passion.
Sure. I guess. So I went into academia, or stayed in academia, should I say, after finished my PhD. I went traveling the world for a year, had enough. That's it. Definitely not going back into academia, and I'll probably live in Sydney. And I ended up coming back into academia. One thing that's never waned is my passion for research and in neuromuscular physiology. It's just that I could not see how I could be necessarily relevant outside that teaching at undergraduate, postgraduate, PhD level and doing more research. And I couldn't see that transition. And certainly when I was doing my undergraduate degree, really the only career was either physiotherapy, which I didn't really have much exposure to, or teaching sport, in education. Sure. So I just followed my passion in terms of research. And then, as I said, the clinical upbringing I had did give me an insight into the relevance of the work that we were doing, which I thought was pretty, I guess it's reasonably kind of pioneering at a PhD level, but only making a tiny little bit of a step forward. I thought that was kind of fairly, all the things I took for granted, I thought that others would know as well. Right. And I think through the career I had, I knew that I didn't want to become necessarily, continue on that conveyor and become a prof, as many of my friends and colleagues are hugely successful, and I really admire them. But I knew there's something else in me that I didn't really know what it was. So I was very fortunate in that a position was written for me in Edinburgh. So I left full-time teaching and researching at Nottingham-Trent University and led a collaboration between University of Edinburgh and Queen Margaret University and the trauma and orthopedic department of the Royal Infirmary to develop more relevant research, if you like, directly into physiotherapy, following trauma and orthopedic surgery, and ideally preoperatively. Obviously you can't do that from trauma surgery, but we're still working on that time machine. But I'd always had a clinical emphasis to my research, so being at the orthopedic hospital in Oswestry and translating that. So I could see some of the relevance, but I couldn't see how, beyond going to academic conferences and publishing, how that could really work. And then through that time in Edinburgh, I really then got an insight into, I suppose, how the rest of the clinical world operated, and what I really took for granted and as basic just wasn't being delivered or indeed even known about. And that's no criticism or any negative connotation to anybody in that field. I could see this massive gaping hole where just a little bit of doing something that's not rocket science, I'm sure could translate into better benefit. So that's where I really, really became more and more passionate about osteoarthritis and total hip and knee replacement, rehabilitation and prehabilitation, or conditioning, whatever you want to call it. So that's where I saw the gap. And that's where I thought, okay, so maybe I could teach this to practitioners or share my knowledge, basically. I don't mean teaching sounds quite, big-headed, but if I can share what I know with you who do the actual work, my impact is likely, or the impact of that knowledge is likely to be bigger and better than if I was to publish it in an academic journal or go to a research conference, both of which I love doing. But it's the therapy community that has got the biggest impact.
Yeah, well, it's that practical application of it. I've overused this expression, but that is where the rubber hits the road, right? There is eventually these concepts and theories need to be translated in practice, embodied through therapists to patients, or they need to be delivered. It's very rare that people, some do, of course, there's some patients and athletes that might grab that from the source, they might be reading the primary materials, but it's a rarer thing, and that we need to try and get that translation right without it watering down. If there's too many steps, that Chinese whispers effect that can occur. I think it's great that we've got you in amongst that. Can you just speak to what you feel the primary concepts were that you were taking for granted and assuming were maybe widespread and should have been being translated to the masses that weren't doing, that has then fueled this fire that you're describing?
Some of the really basic things like strength, and that's why I focus a lot on strength in a lot of my courses. I think it has to be the first thing we address, because when it is addressed, it's often not addressed properly, and then we move on to the next thing and we've missed a critical step. So I do remember when I was doing my PhD, initially I was sponsored by a company in collaboration with the clinical setup to offer a almost like prehabilitation service, an assessment and screening center for, Premiership football, Olympic athletes and the like. So when I was contributing to that, and again, I was so blessed to be as a PhD student, I got to contribute to these designs of these programs and talk with the physiotherapists. And a strength training program at that time, which this shows how old I was, or I am, that was about 2000 and 2001. That a strength training program might involve jumping and sprinting. I'm like, So that's when I started to think, hang on a minute. So those are the critical things. And then some of the things that, again, I couldn't really make sense of is the therapist's job is the hardest job in the world, because you've got, the psychology to get buy-in and trust, but then you've got the design of the best program to elicit optimal adaptation across a multitude of factors. Right. But if you've got somebody, and then you've got people who are symptomatic or in pain or clinical restrictions. Now, if you've got somebody who is symptomatic at a particular joint position, again, I was saying at that time the tendency is like, okay, just drop the load. I'm like, oh no, because if we need to get stronger, if we drop the load and you're going to do loads of stuff at submaximal intensity, is that not wasting everybody's time? You might get a little bit of change of something, but if you're really saying that needs to happen, let's design the exercise, adapt the exercise, keep the specificity, whatever it is, and then change the parameters of that exercise so that you can do what you want to do with that patient, and they can adapt in such a way. So just some of the basic stuff like exercise design and prescription, really. And then everything's built on top of that.
Sorry, in the same time frame, it's been fascinating to see that then we've come to understand that some of the assumptions as to why people were dropping the load off or backing off the intensity on whatever variable was because it was seen as being somehow caring or protective of that person, that it would be then less painful. Whereas TED is a perfect example. We now have the evidence to demonstrate that that's not the case, and that essentially all you were doing was then making the intervention less effective, and it didn't then have a knock-on effect on it being somehow more compassionate because it was less painful. We know that essentially loading these things heavy was no more painful. In fact, some evidence to suggest it can help to modulate it. So why not get on with it? And I think that it's been an interesting thing from what you're describing. You've noticed those practical variables of poor application, say in the therapy game, but then simultaneously, at least that's just probably my naiveties, to me it's almost like simultaneously we've ended up with the research within, say, the sort of pain sciences, as well as some of the applied work on therapies. You probably had insight into that. For you, it might have been that's what was informing your judgment. But to me, as a clinician, it's felt like that wave of knowledge has actually come to support that work, where I think that's one of the things that's been so exciting and why there's a proliferation of interest in S&C amongst the therapists. Do you feel that we've made significant strides at all in that direction, or do you still encounter the same deficits and gaps that you're describing from decades back?
I really do, actually. So a good example was when I first ran my first course for therapists, so S&C, if you like. And again, it's strength and conditioning is something that people tag on to what we're doing. and it's probably a buzzword. It's not necessarily strength and conditioning. It's about exercise prescription and getting neuromuscular physiology right. But that's not, quite as sexy, is it? So
it's a cool jargon at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't care what it's called as long as we can talk about it. But when I asked the group, what is muscle strength, I must have got about 6 or 7 different definitions, which then it highlights that if you think of something, we're doing the same thing essentially, but we're not. So if we're following a protocol or a guideline, then it's conceivable that our patients, if they were genetically exactly the same, they'd end up at different places because we had a different understanding of what things are. Or if we, transfer care to people, it's a mess. So it's just getting some of those things really, really solidified. And I do see, over the past few years, that is much, much better now. Right. And we can start to advance some of the concepts. I used to get asked a lot about electrical stimulation, blood flow restriction training, and all different modalities that are an adjunct and can be really useful adjuncts to bringing about conditioning, particularly in rehabilitating populations. But if we haven't got the building blocks right and we haven't got the understanding right, then it's really a moot point, because probably you're going to get about 80% plus more of the adaptation by doing the basics very, very well. Right. Then we can bring on, or even just understanding frequency of stimulation and percentage of occlusion, what you really want to achieve. And I get it as well, from the pain perspective, you don't want to do any harm. So do no harm, let's not cause pain. Absolutely, completely understand that. And also the time pressures in clinical settings. And then, you've got patient loads that now are probably bigger than they've ever been, and tremendous expectations. You're looking for those potentially quicker fixes. So I get where it comes from. But, just to take a breath, sit back and think about basic neuromuscular physiology of somebody, proper exercise prescription, adapt a little to suit that individual, you're still going to make fantastic gains versus doing more of a sporadic approach without a proper understanding why.
Yeah, I think what's been interesting as well for me observing, I don't know if you've seen Uzo Ehioge has been mentioning this quite a lot recently. He's been taken aback in his own studies as to just how much of a gap there was for him as he pursues more S&C understanding and truly understanding some of even the jargon and principles in and around, say strength. He's been quite reflective about those gaps to some criticism, and he's been brave in sharing that. But what I'm pleased to hear is that there has been some progress, in your opinion, in that direction, although I think there's always an interesting sample bias, isn't there, for those that are coming to, and also even I see that from people that are listening to our materials and stuff, is that it's great to hear from them that it's changing them, but they still press play on a podcast like this that says S&C for therapists. Is clearly an interest of sorts. The things that you've mentioned there that I definitely want to explore with you another time probably is that when I've watched your analysis of adjunctive modalities, BFR, whole body vibration blog that I read recently, just, it's something that I wouldn't say I dismissed, but I definitely parked a long way from my priority.
That's faddish, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Because
cellulite loss, no, it's ridiculous.
But I think that, if I was being sort of generous with myself to say, part of the reason is because its application is so often so fad-like, right? It's the often people that are touting it as an adjunct to what already seems like not appropriate application of fundamentals, right? I watch them, they perceive that they're applying really sensible exercise prescription specificity to really niche, supposedly recruitment-esque motions and movements, right? That they then say, and then do that on a power plate. And I'm like, well, I'm pretty confident you're full of shit here, and it feels like you're then just vibrating it there, and therefore I've then thought it's fad-like because of its application. Whereas watching you unpack the use of those adjuncts then on a good baseline and bring the evidence to bear on it has definitely opened my mind to the fact that now that we're hopefully getting some of the basics right, there are these supplementary things that could add that value, and I think that you and a few others in this space have really helped to to carve out that quality and therefore improve outcomes, when actually I think we had become a bit blinkered, and that there weren't these accessory modalities or adjuncts that we could apply. Do you still feel people grasp for those interesting, novel, shiny things more than they should, or are people being a bit more judicious?
I mean, you're gonna get that in every arena, aren't you? You know, thinking about, I don't know, setting up a business, and you have the people that tout, this is how you build your list, this is the step to the next million, and that kind of thing. You're always going to get those things in every arena. What I don't know. I ultimately don't know, because this is, you know, these types of things are coming in the advanced course, which is in preparation. So I guess I'll see as I start to ask those questions more en masse, you know, get more of a hundreds, thousands of responses rather than, you know, kind of in the scores up to. But yeah, I get why they're there, and I really do understand why, you know, physios, therapists are educated people. When you see shit in the media, you can call it, and then like vibration is just a lot of rubbish. And in many applications it is. But if we come back to, you know, why it's got to there, well, there's been this stupid leap of, and I won't even say it's a leap of faith, a misrepresentation of the neurophysiologic parameters and thus stimuli and thus adaptations from what was, you know, some of the original research and kind of NASA-based applications to reduce bone mineral or attenuate bone mineral density loss and skeletal muscle mass loss, through then to, okay, now we can buy a little plate on Amazon for $80 or £100 and whatever it is, and, you know, can shake cellulite away, you can make it fitter, you know, just, oh, brilliant. You've got these fashion models on them. Oh gosh, come on, that's absolute rubbish. But that's only what you see. You know, you haven't got time to go and dig into the academic literature and trace that back and see, okay, there is some real application here in the right patient populations at the right time. Then whole body vibration in the right frequency. Again, looking at that specificity, overload and progression model, then we could get some really good changes, and maybe that enables us then to move on to other things. But, you know, the way it's propagated en masse currently, I really get why people are thinking, you know, that's
without mad claims of its mechanism of effect. I think that's the thing. I mean, I spoke last week about this in referring in that case to manual therapy. And I was saying about how really the application matters less than the claims made about its mechanism of effect, right? And that's the same thing here, is to, you know, it needs to be sort of couched within its appropriate science, and it's something that therefore can be tempered, but can be applied really well. I had Simon Bartold at the Run Chat Live conference that Matt Phillips organised a couple of years ago, talking about how he thinks that the attenuation of vibration is one of the key reasons that things like the Vaporfly footwear technologies are really breaking through. And he said that the way in which that seems to be reducing fatigue, when he looked at Kipchoge and things like that. And he was just really interesting. He admitted that he was sort of spitballing a little bit, but a couple of years ago, and I'm sure he's pursued that line of reasoning since. But, you know, the opportunity for these things to come to the fore and for us to think on that cutting edge is an exciting area where in rehabilitation circles, people have thought that as we've tried to concentrate on fundamentals, people have thought that then will lead to it being inevitably boring for another decade, right? As if there's not going to be things that we can pursue to try and accentuate the recovery of athletes. And so again, your work and others are really helping us to see that this stuff is interesting, is novel. You can apply innovation in a manner that then isn't gimmicky and then tokenistic with the application of adjuncts.
It's understanding the tools, isn't it? You know, just as you would with any application or mechanics and whatever, you use tools for a specific job. Yeah. And I think the analogy is very similar in this setting. So you've got a specific application, and, you know, as I said, you've got the hardest job because you've got patients that are in pain, they're inhibited, they're hesitant, consciously, subconsciously, all these kind of things. Then we're looking for, you know, to break that cycle and to try and stimulate adaptation, progression, and the like. So then, you know, that makes sense to me to to see whether we've got some potentially efficacious tools, as I said, in the right setting.
Yeah, I've just posted a link into. This is for the webinar as a precursor to your course that we're talking about that you're now recruiting to. And if people use the website link there, they'll be able to find and sign up for the course. We've got some questions coming in on the chat about it. One of them that's definitely well worth us going to now is, would your course be useful for virtual physiotherapy?
Hi, Claire. Great name. Absolutely. So this was really interesting when COVID actually hit. I was just enrolling into one of the courses at that time, or the pandemic and shutdown kind of hit. So everybody on, all 150 people or whatever, everybody was operating virtually. So yes, it's absolutely relevant for virtual physiotherapy, and indeed some of the models that we're developing right now and pursuing involves a virtual prescription and guidance of exercise. The problem or the logistics is then slightly different. So is it that the person's at home and you're thinking about how do I develop overload at home? And we talk about that a lot on the courses and some of the guided sessions. So yeah, its application is very relevant for virtual.
Good. And there's a few other more specific questions on the geography. James Morgan asking about when you're bringing it to Exeter, which Anna's then answered.
Anna Maria, yes. So we've got a live in-person course happening in Exeter I think it's at the end of October.
Brilliant.
Possibly somebody will be able to tell me where I am.
Yeah, well, we'll go. Another date's all on your website.
Yeah, so if you go to getbacktosport.com, you'll be able to see the course I've just been talking about, which is enrolling as of today for another couple of weeks for the online course. And then there's some in-person courses as well, which are, I think it's about 5 or so on there, which again, in the in-person courses listing, which is, down at the school with Anna Maria.
Great. Claire and Talita have enjoyed our language on calling out bullshit. It feels like the appropriate term. I don't think either of us are especially sweary, but it felt appropriate back then. One of the follow-ups that Claire's just posted is she's asking after the sort of muscle testing, etc. Would that lend itself as well as an in-person?
Yeah. So I guess how do you test muscle currently? And do you have dynamometry setups that you can use, which is great. Not every clinic does. So then we're thinking about the logistics of what you have and who you have in front of you and what represents that challenge. So as we become less and less dynamometry focused, it becomes more and more easy to do. But maybe the applicability, the resolution of that measurement is slightly less. So again, that's another thing we talk about a lot. Right. But for example, a sit to stand with an osteoarthritic person with an osteoarthritic knee who's been deconditioned, sat on a waiting list for a year, that might represent a very strength-focused exercise. They might only be able to do 3 repetitions. So then that becomes some sort of indication of a strength capacity. It's not exactly, but again, what is it that you've got around you that you're able to use? Or indeed send out some dynamometers to your patients.
Well, that's what we're working up to, is trying to get these things. Like, I don't know if you ever heard about it or might know about when people used to send out TENS machines and have like 20 TENS machines in every department and stuff, right? I'm thinking that really, if it proliferates on the technology and we can get the access right as well as the regimen right, then dynamometry being able to be in hands of more patients and for them to participate.
Also working on that as well, Jack. Also,
good.
The thing is, it's that fine balance as well, isn't it? Between, I guess we've seen that happen with the development of phones. So, wearable technology and phone technology that records steps and distance and the like. The start of that technology journey wasn't very, very accurate, and a pedometer on your wrist versus one on the hip, another example. But I think that's the issue with dynamometry currently that's available. You make it cheaper, more accessible, more usable. Unless you're going to keep the price point high, which makes it probably inaccessible, then you're going to have to compromise somewhere down the line. So when components become, I guess, cheaper, then maybe that we'll get somewhere closer to just having that resolution.
And also, just especially with dynamometry, it's one of the things that no device can account for poor technique or poor understanding of what it is you're testing. Really, that's one of the things that we've been trying to work on recently, and we've got some more stuff coming out there, and we can chat off air and make sure we're not duplicating there, mate. We can collaborate, no doubt. But I know I don't want to take advantage too much of your time. You've been generous to join us today, anyway. But what I wanted to just finish with was just if you could tell folk a little bit about the format of your course, as well as I'll put that link back up. Because one of the things that we've heard so much about is this, because you do it in cohorts, because some people just have that say it's online and it just rolls, whereas you do this in sort of cohorts. But from what I understand, you do that for a reason, because then almost like a community emerges around that's then really self-supportive and then continues ongoing. So could you just tell us a little bit about what people might expect if they were to look at your course? Yeah,
sure. So it enrolls twice per year, and one of the reasons is very much for that, as you're saying, Jack, in that, with online courses, and I set this up way before COVID. So I was thinking about what do you miss when you go online versus in person. Now, I can only be in one place at one time currently. So if I go online, that means that, more people can access this stuff, but there's going to be something that's missing. So what I wanted to try and recreate was that community. So you get peer-to-peer learning, and you get different takes on things. You get different disciplines. You also get, some of me talking live. So that's why we enroll twice per year rather than just having it as an ongoing thing. And then I do a 6-week guided implementation as well. So this course is, once you've bought the course, it's yours forever. You've got lifetime access. I don't want to shut you down, and you're busy, shit happens. Said shit again and again. So you need to be able to work at your own pace. So it's formatted in such a way you don't have to sit down for 2 hours every evening to get stuff done, chunked into nice, manageable, self-contained units. Also lifetime access, as I said, but also we have a 6-week guided implementation, live Q&As in a closed Facebook group, which has now got way in excess of, I don't know, 600-700 therapists from around the globe that have done this particular course. They come back in periodically and join the sessions, and all those live Q&As are recorded, so you can submit your questions in advance if the time frame doesn't quite meet you where you are in the world. So it's this lovely, lovely community, and as I said, because people are in there who've done the course previously, I sometimes can take a step back. Often I'd like to, because other people can help each other, and often they've got far better ideas than I have anyway. So yeah, it really did that purposefully, because I feel like that can be missing a lot from online courses. And then if you look on the website, you'll be able to see all the different modules. But
I'm interested. I'm definitely hoping to get a bit of a sneak peek on that, because I've been hearing so much about how the application of it across different contexts in different health systems with different, specific needs, when people are asking for support or just asking for guidance or peer reviewing each other's work a little bit. It just sounds like such a melting pot of ideas that's exactly how innovation is going to occur, and bringing that specificity to bear for that bespoke application rather than the cookie cutter approaches that used to be. We've not touched on 3 sets of 10, have we? But we could go that way and think about the sort of almost protocolized application of what was supposedly strength training or exercise prescription historically. So the fact that this stuff's getting tailored and being grappled with, and people are really thinking about their programming is so exciting. I think as well, the way in which community of practices and emerge around work, we've obviously been privy to that ourselves over the years, and we've found that the biggest thing is that they've got something in common that is a piece of content or a resource. The whole thing when we built our think tank really was that MSKR and the big R's that preceded it was born out of the fact that people had a radio show in common, right? When Physio Matters as a podcast was one of the only shows in town, really. Yeah. People listened to that on a regular basis, and therefore could start a conversation in third gear rather than in first gear. Yeah. It just got them ahead. And it sounds like a similar phenomenon has been around your course, when people have got that baseline, they've got that common purpose, and therefore they can work together knowing that they're not going to offer any faux pas on the language or the jargon, and they kind of can refer back to that material. So please, I do encourage everyone to have a little look. I've put the link in the chat, wherever you might be listening to this, barring maybe Instagram and LinkedIn. I'm not sure if it shares there, but I'll try to chase that up in the comments. But getbacktosport.com, and then there is a link in the chat to book into Claire's next course cohort. And as I've said, it's so highly recommended by so many that listen to our material. So it's clearly compatible, as we suspect, with our values as well. And so please do check that out and get booked on before you miss out. Anything else you want to wrap up with there, Claire? I know we're into overtime, but anything else we forgot to cover?
No, I mean, it's always lovely to chat with you and others, and just thanks for having me on. Thanks for the nice plug, and I hope, if anybody's got any questions, I'm always happy to answer them. So just reach out to me. You probably know where I am on social media, or there's a contact me on the website. So really happy.
Brilliant. No, that's it. Let's just keep the conversation rolling, not just with us, of course, but yeah, do reach out to Claire, or if you need to, via us, if you have any further questions, particularly any technical ones. Let's get you signed up on that course. Do not miss out. I know it's going to be popular, and it's literally just open. So like an hour just before we came on or something, Claire had said it's now live. So yeah, if you're keen to get on that next cohort, then do snap that up. And the webinar is tonight, and it gets repeated in a couple of days' time.
Yeah, so it's a live webinar tonight at 7, and then it's also repeated at midday tomorrow as well, also live as well.
Brilliant. Yeah. Brilliant. Okay, no, that's great. So make sure you found those links. If you can't, then let me know, and we'll make sure we get them to you. But for now, that's it from me and Claire. I'll see you tomorrow for more Chewing It Over. I'm pretty sure. I'm just going to double check. But yeah, tomorrow I'm being joined by Finn Robinson, who responded to my podcast last week about FCP, or was it 2 weeks ago, with Keith Graham. He said he has a bit more of a positive take than we were getting. I was inviting people to give the contrasting view, and he reached out to me on LinkedIn saying he agreed with some stuff, disagreed with others. So we're going to get stuck into some stuff about FCP tomorrow, which I'm looking forward to. But otherwise, we'll see you for more Chewing It Over through September. Thanks for joining me for this 200th episode. It's been
my honor. It's an honor.
How exciting. Yeah, hitting all sorts of landmarks, coming up to 100 Physio Matters episodes as well, which is cool. So yeah, we're getting all sorts of milestones. But yeah, thanks as ever, Claire. We'll speak soon, mate. All right.
Bye.
Ciao. Bye.